whatever we're going to call this. We are somewhere in the basement of Assembly Hall. We're not really sure where. We had to find a quiet place with a table and 2 chairs. So that's why it looks like we're in some kind of CIA interrogation room. But we're talking IU Michigan State, obviously big game, maybe the game of the year, certainly in the Big Ten.
Seems like we've said that a couple times, mostly after games.
So, but Michigan State's still got to go to Michigan and Ohio State. Indiana's still got to go to Minnesota and Michigan after this. But this is a big game. It's a big game for a number of reasons. Really, probably actually a bigger game for Indiana in some ways. Both teams, whoever wins will have a 1-game lead in the conference. But like I said, both teams still have some significant tests. Indiana also plays Ohio State at home. So it's not like whoever wins this can, just sort of
a championship.
Right. But if you're Indiana, really, you look at this, the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee really, I don't believe, looks at conference record. But they do look at head-to-head matchups. They look at things like conference RPI. And if these two teams were to finish in a tie for the Big Ten regular season title, and Indiana were to have won both games against Michigan State, then they would get the number 1 seed in the Big Ten, and they would also not only win the regular season title, they would technically probably, in the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee's eyes, have an automatic sort of built-in, de facto tiebreaker with Michigan State for a number 1 seed or for location of seeding as well. There's a lot on the line tomorrow night in East Lansing, and yes, we have said, game of the season a lot. We've seen number 1 versus number 3 in the Big Ten. We obviously, it was a bit of a letdown the way it ended, but we saw a very big game already last week at the Breslin Center in East Lansing, Michigan State, Michigan. This one, in terms of impact on the regular season title race, maybe the biggest we'll see this year.
Yeah, definitely. The way things have shaken out, both of these teams have beaten Michigan at home. Michigan State, obviously very, very convincingly last week. And just in that game, we just saw Michigan State really completely manhandle Michigan inside and limit, Mitch McGarry and Glenn Robinson. And it's not like those are the elite big guy. It's not like they stuffed Cody Zeller, one of the elite big guys in the conference. But just the way that they just completely cut off the paint last week and just kind of strangled Michigan in a lot of ways. It's something kind of to look at going into this meeting, and just the way that Michigan State has performed at home this year. I don't think they've lost at the Breslin Center, which is in a year where teams in the Big Ten, teams in the top 5 are falling all over the place. It's a sign of stability there for Michigan State, for Tom Izzo, for those guys, that they haven't had that one loss at home. They haven't had that Wisconsin loss at home like a couple teams have, and we've seen just a lot of stability from Michigan.
It's interesting. I think one of the things that really showed in that Michigan game was the ability that maybe people are still looking for from Indiana, although we probably saw it at Ohio State, just kind of the ability when you've got your foot on the other team's throat to not let up, to just keep pressing down until you've just completely taken them out. Again, I think we saw that at Ohio State for Indiana, but not to the level that Michigan State did to Michigan. It's interesting you mentioned, Michigan State hasn't lost at home. This, I believe, is their first foray into the top 5. They're number 4 in the AP poll today, or that was announced today, and I believe that is their first top 5 ranking this year. And this game opened with Indiana favored. I think it's moved now to even. Wouldn't be surprised if it had moved maybe slightly toward Michigan State by tomorrow.
I almost expect that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people thought that original line was probably put out there to encourage some betting, dare I say. But this might be Michigan's first real Michigan State. Thank you. Their first real taste of. I don't want to say their first taste of expectation. They're a veteran team. They're a well-coached team. Tom Izzo has been doing it forever, and he's been doing this forever. He's just been taking, he's been taking these teams that everyone thought, hey, they're the 3rd best team in the conference. Maybe they're the 4th best team. Oh, wait, no. They're a Big Ten title contender again. That has just kind of become his MO in the regular season. And, I think this is Michigan State's, this is kind of their time in the spotlight. I don't mean any disrespect to Michigan, but I think that this game is bigger in a way because, we're so close now to, basically, this will be 75% of the conference season done. This is the #1 team in the nation coming into their building. And it seems like they would very much like to continue playing the role of underdogs. We heard Derek Nix last week suggest in a pretty straightforward manner that he doesn't think Cody Zeller is that much better than Adrian Payne, that he doesn't think Trey Burke is that much or is that much better than Keith Appling, that he does not think Victor Oladipo is really noticeably better than Brandon Dawson. Statistically, you could make arguments against some of those assertions. But that seems to be, it's interesting if Michigan State will really be able to carry that into this game, because that seems to be the mentality they want. That seems to be the identity they want. Derek Nix is pretty outspoken, in a good way, certainly. But he's fairly outspoken, and he's sort of one of that. He's one of that team's primary mouthpieces. And to hear him say that, again, I don't know that I would agree with all the assertions, but that's kind of the approach they want to go into with this. Can they do that when they're a top 5 team?
Yeah, you definitely want. You don't want one of your players saying that they're better than, but you kind of do want to have that swagger, just to see that everyone is anointing Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo and these guys. When you think that you have, Adrian Payne is an absolute freak athletically, and as you said, kind of in today's press conference, he seems like he keeps adding dimensions to his game and kind of refining them.
And just consistency in a number of areas.
Yeah, and we saw him hitting 3-pointers here a couple weeks ago, which was something that last year would have been just kind of not
shocking.
Yeah. We've just been, and it was almost shocking here just to see him hit them with such authority, with such confidence there. But it is a very dangerous team, and it's always a dangerous team as you have Tom Izzo. As you said, he's a guy who takes a team that doesn't seem like it's in it in November or December or something, and then he wins the Big Ten tournament and is the #1 seed or something like that, like they were last year.
Yeah.
And to have that swagger at this point, and I don't want to overuse that term because it's an annoying word, but just to have that confidence, to have that gusto, I guess, going into this game is something that's big for them. Big for them going into this huge game that, they've had 2 really big home games back to back. That Michigan game, not only is it, a battle of basically top 10 teams, but it's Michigan. It's an in-state rival, and then to have this game be, not necessarily a rivalry game, but it's almost just as big because of its magnitude for both teams as we're advancing further and further down the course of the season. And even though they both, like we've mentioned, have hard roads ahead of them, this is just kind of this is a game to really.
You get the feeling whoever wins this, honestly, if you're Indiana, if you win this, you would feel very confident about going to Minnesota next week, and then you would feel confident about winning your last 2 home games against teams you've already beaten on the road in pretty tough environments.
And then going to Michigan.
So then, that's it. That's the, if Indiana were to do that, were to win its next 4, and I'm not saying that that's easy, that's the conference title. Then they at least win a share of the regular season title, because the best Michigan State can do if Indiana wins 4 or 5, including a win in East Lansing, is catch them. But it's not. It's not going to be easy for either side. I think that's part of what is so intriguing about this game. And with all respect to Michigan, I think this one is better because I think Michigan State's got more advantages on its side in the front court than Michigan did, and maybe even still really does right now. On one hand, Tom Crean talked about this a fair bit today. Michigan State's a matchup problem all over the floor for Indiana. Keith Appling is an exceptional guard. Gary Harris has been shooting the ball so well lately, particularly from behind the arc. Brandon Dawson is, for whatever comparison you want to draw or anything like that, he's still an outstanding player. He's an outstanding athlete who can do a number of different things. And then Derek Nix and Adrian Payne might be, in their own ways, the best front court in the Big Ten. On the other hand, you've got an NBA-level power forward center type in Cody Zeller, who has, by and large this season, save 1 week, including a game against Michigan State. Been exceptionally consistent in his production, scoring and rebounding. He's been much better defensively than he was a year ago. You've got Christian Watford, who all Big Ten season long has been consistent, and in the last few weeks has really kind of just seen. I mean, he's emerged to the point that we were talking about him on Twitter today, like a first-team All Big Ten candidate. And I don't know if he's there yet, but that's what we're talking about. And then you've got Oladipo, who it seems likely he's going to play, and he might be. I mean, this was pretty impressive. Tom Izzo today suggested that Victor Oladipo is Tom Crean's Mateen Cleaves, and Cleaves was kind of the starring figure on Izzo's national title team in 2000, the one that really kind of reestablished under him Michigan State's relevance nationally, or as a perennial national power in recruiting, in its conference, in the NCAA tournament. That it had been for years under Judd Heathcote. I mean, that was kind of the moment. And obviously, Tom Crean knows a lot about Mateen Cleaves.
Yeah, he's one of the guys who recruited.
Yeah, he recruited all the Flintstones kids and really was a primary architect of that whole 2000 national title team before he left for Marquette. And, I mean, there's so many different ways this game could go that you almost can't help but feel like we have no idea who's going to win. We have no idea how. But this almost seems guaranteed to be a great game, and Lord knows I don't want to jinx it, and certainly I'm sure no one wants to see another 23-point blowout in what is supposed to be a premier Big Ten regular season game after all the good ones, all the great ones we've been treated to so far this season. But there really is just a feeling like the only thing that you know to expect out of tomorrow night is that it's going to be a really good game.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's almost like the IU Michigan game that we saw here a couple weeks ago. Is that these are two really, really good teams. They have their flaws, but they are also really, really good teams, competitive, and it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great atmosphere because it always is in either of these places. And I mean, it's just one of those games that you can't miss, and you hope that like you said, it's not the huge letdown that was last week at the Breslin Center.
Well, and it's
not a letdown for Michigan State,
but I mean, in terms of just going into the game thinking, hey, this is going to be a big one, this is going to be a great one. It's interesting to look at Michigan State and how far they've come. When they played here, I think the final score was 75-70. Cody Zeller didn't score much. Gary Harris kind of went off a little bit. But at that time, if you looked at them statistically, they were not as good offensively just over the course of their whole season as they played that afternoon. Mm-hmm. That was a Sunday afternoon game. But it seems like they're getting back there. It seems like they're getting to a point where that is actually more of what they're capable of consistently. That wasn't an abnormal performance to shoot the way they did from behind the arc, to see Adrian Payne extending his range. I mean, I don't know if he makes 3 or 4 3-pointers tomorrow night, but extending his range. And Michigan State will certainly feel like, hey, if we play like that at home, and then Keith Appling doesn't get in foul trouble, we'll win.
Yeah, where they've really been able to keep that production. Plus, having Keith Appling, who scores more than, I think, 3 points in that game and fouls out with 5 or so minutes to go, something like that. And yeah, we've seen it from their guys across the board, and especially with Gary Harris, who, I mean, it's not like he was not shooting well before he came here, but I mean, he's made multiple 3-pointers, and I think every game since then, and he's just been, shooting, and I think he won Big Ten Freshman of the Week this week, if I'm not mistaken, and he's just been playing insanely well. So that, I mean, both backcourt with Appling and with Harris, and then front court, as we've talked about for a few minutes of this, with Payne, with Nix. It's a very hard team to defend, as is IU. So.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Crean just basically said today, there's nowhere to take a breath. There's nowhere on Michigan State, sort of, when you look at the scouting report, when you look at the lineups and the matchups, and the starting 5 plus the 2 or 3 guys they most often go to on the bench, Valentine, Trish if he's healthy, Alex Gana, Matt Costello. There's nowhere. His quote was, "There's nowhere you can take a breath. There's nowhere where you can step back and just be like, okay, we don't need to worry about this or this. They're that talented and they're that deep." And I think, for me anyway, I think the key's Appling. I think if Indiana can find a way to get him out of the game again, or at least because last year he killed them at Michigan State and then he was a non-factor at Indiana. And then this year, he was a total non-factor at Indiana. Can they figure out a way to at least just limit him, force him into some turnovers? You know, Tom Green talked about don't send him to the foul line, don't let him get a lot of free, easy points. That's not an easy thing to do on the road in the Big Ten. The officiating is, quite frankly, often slanted toward the home team. I mean, that's just how it works in this conference on the road, and most conferences probably on the road. Can Indiana find a way to remove him from that game and or him down enough to slow Michigan State's offense down? And then it's also, I mean, Indiana's going to have to be what they were at Ohio State, maybe even better. And that doesn't mean 320-plus point performances, but it means they got to be hitting their shots. They got to be getting stops. They've got to be controlling, you know, what Tom Crean has taken to calling. They've got to really understand time and score situations, and they just can't get rushed. So one way or the other, we're gonna find out. We're gonna stop talking about it now and get out of this jail cell down here.
Yeah, find our way back.
But we will, yeah, if we find our way back, we will be back for overtime tomorrow night. Rain or shine, whatever happens, we will be talking to you again in about 29 hours-ish. So stay tuned and enjoy the game. For Alex McCarthy, I'm Zach Osterman. You've been watching Inside Indiana Overtime Pregame.